I think that's always been true to our brand is try to really lean into senior level executives. The speakers are all CEOs and presidents. The attendees are generally director level and above.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special event spotlight episode of Travel Trends. This is your host, Dan Christian, and today we're going to be exploring the Phocuswright Europe event that is happening June 10th to 12th, 2025 in beautiful Barcelona. I'm going to be there for the very first time, and I'm so looking forward to it. I've been to many Phocuswright events in the US over the years, but this is the first European event that I'm going to have the privilege to go to. And given my enthusiasm and anticipation, I wanted to create this special spotlight episode and bring together two extraordinary individuals, Pete Comeau, the managing director of Phocuswright, who you've heard from on this podcast before, and Florence Cauchi, who is the senior director of Phocuswright Europe. Now, Pete and Florence combine to bring this event together, but Florence leads us locally since she's based in the beautiful south of France. And I wanted to have the opportunity to speak to them both, which I had the privilege to do live at ITB Berlin in the Phocuswright booth. And so we're going to talk to Pete first, and then we're going to go over to Florence and learn all of the insights and the highlights of what they're looking forward to, the speakers, the sessions, the themes, all the things that we need to be paying attention to going into Phocuswright Europe 2025 to make the most out of that conference. But one of the things I just wanted to highlight before we start is they have kindly offered all of our Travel Trends listeners a special €100 discount over whatever the prevailing price is at the moment of a Phocuswright Europe ticket. All you have to do is go to phocuswrighteurope.com, click on new registration, and then add the discount code TravelTrends25. We also have a live link on our website so that you can just dynamically go through to book your ticket. So you can check that out as well on traveltrendspodcast.com. But you should otherwise just be set to use the discount code right on Phocuswright Europe's website. The other thing I wanted to highlight too is that with us being there, we're going to have a booth and a great setup to record podcasts at the event, just like we've done at Phocuswright USA the last 2 years. And we'll be back at Phocuswright San Diego in November 2025 as well, for those of you who are marking your calendars and making plans for that event. But the one I wanted to highlight to all of our listeners headed to Phocuswright Europe, if you use that promo code, my commitment is that every listener that books a ticket using our Travel Trends 25 discount code will be guaranteed to be interviewed and included in our Phocuswright Spotlight edition from Europe. I have already heard from a few listeners that have booked their ticket and emailed me to let me know. So I definitely encourage any of those of you that do, feel free to drop me a line, Dan at Travel Trends Podcast, so we can schedule time to record at Phocuswright Europe in Barcelona. And for those of you who won't be able to join us, we will have a highlight video from the event itself. So be sure to subscribe and look out for that coming out in a few months' time. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing many of you there, and I'm keen now to bring in Pete Comeau into this conversation. So one of the things I just wanted to start our conversation with Pete is I wanted to pick up exactly where we left off in San Diego. Do you remember what you said to me when I came up to you on that last night? There was an after party, and I came up to thank you for bringing Travel Trends, giving us the opportunity to record, because I love Phocuswright. It is literally my favorite, or one of my favorite, but it's like the Oscars of travel for me. And you know how strongly I feel about the Phocuswright company and team and yourself. Do you remember what you said to me that night?
I don't remember specifics, although I suspect it was somewhere around, how well you really amplify the messages of our audience, and people love being on your podcast. It's a really important part of them coming to our event. And I think that's what makes our partnership so strong, is they feel like they're getting value out of being there and also getting value out of the audience that you bring to them. So
that's lovely. The exact comment you said to me that really warmed my heart at the time was like, you're part of the family now.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
That is true as well.
So I was like, oh man, what an honor to be invited into the Phocuswright family.
I may have said family. We are using the word community a lot more. And I think that's also something that speaks to our brand and also speaks to what we try to do here, is bring people together around travel tech and topics and really embrace them as part of the community.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's one thing that, being here in Europe together, this is my first time at ITV. Obviously, you're familiar with this conference. You have a presence in Europe with the Phocuswright Europe conference. And I literally want to dive right into that, because if people want to learn more about you and more about Phocuswright, they can obviously listen to that fantastic interview that we did. But what I wanted to dive right into is the fact that our relationship has continued to evolve and advance. So a big thanks to you and to Gene and the team, because you guys kindly invited me to Phocuswright Europe in Barcelona for the very first time. So we're going to be at the event for the first time. We've actually just highlighted on our podcast that anyone listening to our Travel Trends podcast can actually get a €100 discount. It's a Travel Trends 25, but there's a unique link on our website. It's a dynamic link. And I also said at the very end of that podcast on the African Safari series, I highlighted that anyone who uses that link, I will guarantee them that I will interview them at Phocuswright Europe. So there's an additional incentive to book
Love it.
and to come, and I'll make sure that you get on the show. But yeah, Pete, so thanks so much for that opportunity. Let's talk about Phocuswright Europe. What I've heard already is that there's a new venue for this year. So you tell us about the theme for Phocuswright Europe. Tell us about the venue and what people can expect.
Yeah, so we are excited to bring the event to a new venue, the Gran Meliá Hotel. There's an amazing conference center, convention center, Palau de Congressos de Catalunya, that's right next to it. And it allows us to bring people in, keep them at a really nice resort style hotel, and also provide amazing conference facilities, and more importantly, amazing places to network. And that's what we're all about, as you know, is bringing together a community and providing a platform for them to meet others, to do business, to do partnerships, to learn what's new in the ecosystem. We're also bringing the finals of our global startup pitch to Europe this year.
Very cool.
So that's something that we used to do virtually. This is an event that we do in collaboration with WIT. So Suhoon and the Web and Travel brand. So we go out and scour all around the world to find interesting startups, and we're bringing them to Barcelona this year to pitch. So that's something new that we think will add a really nice element to the event. So we're going to produce that on the Tuesday. And it's also, it's really about providing that space that allows for people to connect. And that's what our brand is all about. And we're really looking forward to that.
Well, it's certainly one of the things that got highlighted over and over again when I was at Phocuswright in San Diego. And we had the opportunity when I was at Phocuswright in Phoenix, and you're going to be at San Diego coming up.
Yes.
And, but yeah, when I was at Phocuswright Phoenix, we produced a 2-part series, as many of our listeners know, at the end of season 4. And we literally put it at the end of season 4 because when you listen to the conversation that I had with Pete, and many of our listeners have followed our journey, and what I highlighted to him is I always saw Phocuswright as kind of the New York Times, on the Sunday New York Times. You could kind of get the sense of what the industry was going to be, what was going to be happening in the industry over the next 6 months. Pete kindly corrected me and said, well, we're more like 3 months because the world's changing so quickly. But nevertheless, the compliment remains the same, is that when you go to Phocuswright, you have an opportunity to see what is really going to shape the industry. And the other thing that came up in all those conversations, and I highly encourage people to actually listen to that 2-part series, because we spoke to many CEOs and executives and various people that come together for Phocuswright. It gives a pretty good overview of the whole ecosystem. And one of the things everyone kept talking about is the fact that you get access to decision makers. So, you're not only just networking, but you're networking with the person that can actually make a decision on whether there's going to be a deal or a partnership to be had. So
yeah. It is important, and I think that's always been true to our brand is try to really lean into senior level executives. The speakers are all CEOs and presidents. The attendees are generally director level and above. So that's always a really important part, because we know the price tag on a Phocuswright conference is relatively high, and we understand that. Although we are, offering a nice discount to Travel Trends members. So we're excited about that as well. As far as content this year, we're bringing our theme from our global event to our European event, but it's going to be a very different conversation, because of course we'll take the content and localize it for the most important trends and topics that the European market cares about. So that's something that, we're talking about the new agents, and there's, as you said, it's not about 6 months. It's probably not about 3 months. It seems like things are changing on a weekly basis, and agents, whether it's autonomous agents or we're also certainly looking at more traditional travel agents that are really thriving. And here at ITB, I just listened to a panel on stage where Mitra Sorrells presented some data from Phocuswright. And also there was some discussion around travel agents and how Gen Zs are really still embracing that traditional channel because they can get the service, they can get the personalization. So it's interesting to see how those things are evolving along with technology.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the things that are obviously the same about Phocuswright from USA to Europe. And given I haven't had the chance to attend Europe yet, and I'm so looking forward to it, I'd love to also talk about some of the things that are different and unique, because some of the guests that I had a chance to interview in Phoenix had been to Phocuswright Europe, and they were so impressed with it that they couldn't wait to come to the US event. So let's talk about, I guess, the difference in the size and scale, because Phocuswright USA, the audience is what, about 1,000, 1,500 people?
1,500, yes.
Yeah. And then, so obviously it's a large conference. How does Europe compare? What is the numbers you're typically looking at for that conference?
So the Europe event is about a little less than half the size, so about 600 people, which is, I mean, we love the 1,500 people that we bring together to our global event, but the Europe event is a little more intimate. You can talk to everybody there on site if you want. It's a really good mix of technology companies, hotel suppliers, smaller hotel chains that maybe we don't get at our global event. They come to Europe because they can get that a bit more intimate experience. Airline executives, of course, online travel companies like Booking and Expedia and Trip.com, and the big players in the market will be there. But, the topics are, there's a lot more rail discussion, which obviously,
Yeah.
is very timely and specific for Europe. There is a lot of discussion around sustainability and how do you build a sustainable destination. So we're digging deep into that, and we're bringing together destinations and distributors to the same discussion to try to figure out how can we as an industry not just manage tourism once the travelers get to destination, but also, educate them. And Mitra presented some of this today at ITB. How do we educate travelers on what traveling more sustainably means and how they do it? And I think that's a big gap that we've seen in the market.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting you mentioned rail travel, because Pete kindly let me record in their Phocuswright booth to interview the CEO of Rail Bookers, Frank Marini, which was a fascinating conversation. I definitely encourage you to listen to that. And one of the other topics that we're focusing on in season 5 is with Bjorn, the CEO of Rail Europe. And so Rail, absolutely, here we are in the heart of Europe in Berlin, and certainly many people have actually traveled to this event on Rail. And the questions I've been asking them is around sustainability. So obviously, this is where the content adjusts to the local audience. I know from the U.S. experience, it is an international event. It is obviously predominantly U.S. based. However, there are people who travel from around the world to be there. How does that compare to Europe? And I guess I'm really excited that the idea of it being a smaller, more intimate event really genuinely excites me, especially when we'll see the contrast from being here with 100,000 people in Berlin, which is great as well, but it's also a different experience.
Different experience.
Yeah. So a little closer to get to each of your next meetings when you're in Barcelona. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about the audience that comes together for that. And if it is, very focused on the European market. And I guess I'm highlighting that because so many companies are going to be focused on Europe for 2025 and 2026 for many, many reasons, that with all these geopolitical events happening around the world, that Europe is a very strong travel market, inbound and outbound. So I think many more people are going to be interested in Europe this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we certainly localize the topics for a very Europe specific audience. So, roughly 80% of the audience at Phocuswright Europe is from Europe. Although from a content perspective, so we have Matt Goldberg this year, the CEO of TripAdvisor,
Right, yeah.
who obviously, leads a big, massive global company. We'll talk about a lot of the topics from his business that are specific to Europe, but there certainly is an international element. And of course, a lot of the biggest travel companies are based in Europe, whether it's Booking.com or TUI or some of the big airlines that'll be there in attendance. We run a Wit Europe session. So Suhoon will bring in some speakers from Asia to talk about what, the Asian markets mean for Europeans, whether it's inbound or outbound. So that's always a really unique session where, She runs about an hour's worth of content with speakers that are from Asia, from emerging markets, and really kind of helping the European-based audience understand what's going on in different parts of the world. So while it is an event that we curate and localize for Europe, we also do cover other markets and really look at what the European context is as it relates to the rest of the industry.
Yeah, it's exciting. And we're actually going to have your colleague Florence join us in a moment. So for those of you that this episode is actually going to have two amazing interviews with Pete and Florence. And Florence is actually based in Europe near Monaco, and she actually runs the Barcelona event. And so we'll get into some additional detail. But while we have Pete here with us, since he is the managing director globally for Phocuswright, I also wanted to take the opportunity to talk a bit more about all the exciting things that are happening with Phocuswright. But just before we do, for those people that are now intrigued about joining us in Phocuswright Europe, obviously they can use the link on the Travel Trends website. But just would you remind everyone, Pete, the dates for the event and the venue?
Yes. So dates are June 10th through 12th. Hotel venue is the Gran Meliá. And it's by the university. It's really a beautiful area of Barcelona. So it will feel like our global conference, that we've really put our stamp on a resort style venue, a conference center that's really close. We like to kind of lock people in, but it's a very good reason. So they can come together, network, do business, do deals, learn from each other. So we're really excited to bring that sort of experience to Phocuswright Europe.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm so looking forward to it. But given the number of things that Phocuswright has on, I also wanted just to highlight the research that you do, because obviously that's an important part of your practice. I think you're so well known for the events, but part of our previous conversation and how I really got to know Phocuswright and really benefit from the partnership was getting access to the research that I could use for justifying business investment. And something that just recently came to my attention, because you yourself and the team, and I've got to know many of the team members that, which you've got a terrific organization, some amazing team members. Mike Coletta, who's doing a lot of work on AI, you kindly partnered with us on our AI Summit in 2024, and we'll have more details about 2025. But you guys have really started to focus on AI, which is fantastic. But you also have expanded this research, because whenever I get ready for a podcast, I always look for Phocuswright research, or I reach out to you guys to say, I'm about to do an African safari series or a river cruise series. What is some of the data that you can share with me to set the context? But I recently discovered that you've been producing more of this content and making it available. So tell us about this new approach and where people can find these new reports, which are, I couldn't believe it wasn't behind a paywall. I was like, oh my God, there's so much great content here.
Well, there's still great content behind the paywall. So,
right.
But we've recognized that, it's important for us to get our research out. Not only from a marketing perspective, but also we get a lot of people that come and ask, how do I engage with Phocuswright? What does your research look like? And so we produced a piece last December called Travel Forward, which is kind of a summary of all of the different types of work that we do, from market sizing to consumer behavior to technology and innovation, social media. So that's available for free. Phocuswright.com. Just Google Travel Forward Phocuswright and it'll pop up. So that's one piece. Mike Coletta, who you mentioned, put together our travel innovation and tech trends piece. Yeah. And we've also made that available publicly. So that's a piece, again, you can find it on our homepage. A lot of the detail and depth we will reserve for our research subscribers. But again, we want to make sure that we get our research out, that people understand what types of topics that we're researching, so they can either purchase, deep, kind of detail if they want, or they can come to our conference and they get to, a bit more of a flavor of what we're all about.
Yeah, and I think that's where they're very substantial appetizers to try and get people into the entree, which is absolutely worth the price of admission. I mean, I used to pay a real premium for it. I know the cost has come down considerably, and you now have monthly and you have startup rates. So you've really adapted to the market. But I think this was an example to me where not only had I discovered it, I then had to actually forward it to a number of our acceleration team clients, to some of our team members, because it's such valuable information. So I love that you are getting ahead of the curve and making that available. So obviously research, events. What are some of the other big developments for Phocuswright in 2025? And I want to finish off too by talking about San Diego.
Yeah, so of course, Phocuswire is our media channel that we continue to cover the most important topics. It's freely available, daily basis. We're looking at acquisitions, startup funding. We cover the publicly traded online travel companies. So Linda Fox does a great job of kind of curating that daily news that we cover on Phocuswright. Mitra is spending a lot of time kind of, bringing together our bodies of content and making sure that we're looking at the topics from a daily coverage, from a in-depth research coverage, and on the stage at our events. So you'll see a little bit more consistency of topic coverages across all of our different bodies of work. So those are the two probably biggest things that we're working on right now. San Diego, you mentioned, is a new venue for us, which we're excited about. Normally we're East Coast, West Coast kind of alternating. This year is kind of an odd year for us because our East Coast venue was already booked. So we decided, let's go to San Diego. I mean, what a better place to host an event. So we're at the Hyatt Manchester in San Diego, which is a fantastic venue, fairly recently renovated. It's right on the marina.
That's beautiful.
It's a great property, but it's what Phocuswright conference attendees expect, with really high quality AV, lots of choice of restaurants available, a really nice bar,
which is where most of the business deals get done.
Where most of the business deals get done. So that's always a priority for us, is having a nice bar where people can get together, after hours and have those conversations that are really meaningful. So,
and I just wanted to highlight with the reports, one of the stats that I recently uncovered in what some of Mike Coletta's work. He was highlighting startup funding in 2024, and one of the Q4 was the very first time that startup funding to B2B travel companies outpaced B2C. And I found that fascinating. I've mentioned on our podcast, I've mentioned in some speaking engagements. Obviously, I do a lot of work on the B2B side, and this is where companies need to understand that, because if you have a captive audience, if you've got an existing market, it's much more easy to investors than a higher risk B2C play. And so these AI tools that many of these companies are introducing, the AI tools, the money is flowing to B2B companies that are creating great technology for partners. But it's a trend report like that actually really, for me, I can point to and say, hand on heart, there's something significant happening here. This is the cutting to the signal across the noise. But yeah,
I mean, for sure. And I think we've always, voiced a bit of caution for companies that are trying to launch a B2C business, because they're competing, against $14 billion of marketing dollars that the OTAs are spending. Really challenging to break through. However, there's a lot of great applications across B2B. So we're seeing that shift. We're also seeing investors still being a little bit cautious about investing. Hopefully this year we'll start to see more money coming into the travel startup ecosystem. We've been dealing with a high interest rate environment. Certainly inflation has factored in. Valuations have, I think, finally come down to a place where investors are starting to look for opportunities. Acquisitions we've actually seen pick up, especially in Europe. We've seen some pretty big acquisitions, some other raises that, it's companies that are kind of following on previous raises, Series B, Series C. So, we're optimistic about the travel startup ecosystem, especially with AI. And I think we'll start to see some really impressive companies build out of, very small engineering teams. AI just allows these companies to test ideas and get them out to market without having to build a 100-person engineering team. So we're going to start to see some really interesting things come out.
Well, it's something that I always loved about attending a Phocuswright conference. And this has really been, in the last 10 years that I've been going, there's always been a focus on startups and the pitch day. And it was part of the reason I always looked forward to attending, especially in my role as being a chief digital officer at a large travel group, where you're trying to connect startups with established travel brands to give them that agility, to give them, the opportunity to influence the roadmap of a smaller startup, that you've got a smart team that is looking to work with an established brand and to be able to build that relationship. And that's just something I think that you guys have wisely navigated, because some of those startups go on to become quite successful businesses. Like you're feeding the ecosystem. And so I'm glad you highlighted that. And I'm glad to hear that's going to be part of what I can look forward to in Barcelona. Just to finish off, Pete, and then we'll bring Florence on to give us some additional highlights about Barcelona. We're here at ITB. You mentioned Mitra's presentation, obviously sharing some of the Phocuswright research stats. What else brings you to ITB this year, and what are some of the benefits you find of being here?
Yeah, so it's a lot of our clients are here. ITB has done a really nice job of kind of building up their tech presence. So we're meeting with a lot of our customers. We're also hosting a dinner where we're bringing together some of our top customers and constituents from across the industry. So that's an event that we always love to kind of convene our community, and ITB is a great place to do it because many of them are here. So it's kind of a captive audience of members of our community, whether it's investors or startups or or executives from across the category.
That's exciting. Well, it's a real pleasure to see you here, Pete. I always look forward to catching up with you. I'm certainly really looking forward to seeing you again in a few months in Barcelona for the first time. Thanks again for the opportunity, the partnership, and our friendship. And obviously, I'm a huge fan of Phocuswright, so I look forward to all of our listeners just checking out Phocuswright, checking out Phocuswire, and staying tuned to all of your research, and certainly, definitely come and see us in Barcelona. And if for any reason you're not able to meet us in Barcelona, be there in San Diego.
Indeed. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks a lot, Pete. I now have the privilege to sit down live here at the ITB conference in Berlin with Florence Cassi, who is the Senior Director of Phocuswright Europe. And we actually just had the pleasure to meet last week at Forbes Travel Guide, the summit in Monaco. Charlotte, our common friend, introduced us, and I was like, no way, Florence, I'm coming to Phocuswright Europe for the first time. So I was so thrilled to meet you, delighted that I get a chance to sit down with you here and talk about the event. So Florence, welcome to Travel Trends.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
Tell everybody where you get to live, because you live in one of the most beautiful parts of the world, I have to say. Let's start with that, because you're like, I'm not actually traveling here. I live near here. So tell everyone where you're based.
So I'm based out of France, on the French Riviera.
Beautiful.
I usually don't mention it too much, not to make people jealous about the weather. I live close to Antibes, in the south of France, outside of Nice.
Stunning, stunning, stunning. So my family, I was born in England, and my family went in different directions, and my aunt and their kids moved to the south of France, and they live near Roquebrune-sur-Argens.
Yes.
And I used to